The email arrived at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. I was pouring my second cup of coffee, watching steam curl into the morning light filtering through our kitchen windows. My phone buzzed against the granite countertop. The subject line read, "Revised shareholding structure, final execution." No greeting. No explanation. Just a PDF attachment and a CC line that included his corporate attorney, Malcolm Hendricks. I opened the document with my thumb, still holding my mug in the other hand. The letterhead was familiar. Our company. Vanguard Solutions. The tech firm we'd built together over 12 years. I scanned the first page. Then the second. My ownership stake, the 47% I'd held since our Series B funding, was gone. Reallocated. Dissolved. My name appeared once, in a footnote, listed as non-participating spouse with advisory status only. Zero equity. Zero voting rights. Zero future distributions. The document was dated yesterday. Signed by my husband, Trevor Ashford, and notarized by someone named Cordelia Watts. I didn't know her. The timestamp showed 4:32 p.m. He'd executed it yesterday afternoon while I was in a client meeting downtown, discussing product strategy with one of our largest enterprise customers. I set my mug down carefully. Dried my hands on the kitchen towel hanging from the oven handle. Then I replied with 2 words, "Document received." My hands didn't shake. My breathing remained steady. I'd learned years ago that emotional reactions cloud judgment. And I needed absolute clarity for what was coming next. I didn't call him. I didn't storm into his office or demand an explanation. Instead, I finished my coffee, rinsed the mug, and placed it upside down on the drying rack the way I always did. My morning routine continued unchanged. Shower. Dress. Check email. Review the day's schedule. Trevor had been working from the downtown office more frequently over the past 6 months. Late nights. Weekend strategy sessions. Board meetings I wasn't invited to anymore. When I asked about them, he'd wave me off with practiced casualness. Just operational stuff. Nothing strategic. You know how these things drag on. I'd stopped asking 3 months ago. Not because I didn't care, but because I was watching. Listening. Documenting. People reveal themselves when they think no one's paying attention. Trevor had stopped being careful around me. Stopped filtering his phone conversations. Stopped closing his laptop when I walked into the room. He thought I wasn't paying attention. That was his first mistake. I opened my laptop and navigated to our shared company drive. The folder structure was complex, years of accumulated files, contracts, amendments, and board resolutions. Most people would get lost in it. I'd organized it myself 5 years ago, creating a logical system that made sense to me and apparently to no one else. I typed 1 word into the search bar, contingency. 3 documents appeared. I opened the second one. A shareholder agreement from our series of funding round, executed 8 years ago. 47 pages of dense legal language that Trevor had signed without reading completely. I knew because I'd read every word. Twice. I'd also been the one to insist on several specific clauses. And I remembered exactly what was buried in Section 19, subsection D. The clause was technical. Boring, even. The kind of legal language that makes people's eyes glaze over during contract review sessions. Trevor's attorney had drafted it at my insistence, back when we were still partners in every sense of the word. Back when I trusted him to stay that way. It stated, in careful legal terminology, that any unilateral attempt to materially alter the ownership structure without unanimous board consent would trigger an automatic conversion event. Control wouldn't disappear, it would invert. Temporarily at first, with a 90-day review period. But if the offending party attempted additional unauthorized changes during that window, the conversion became permanent. The clause included specific language about material alteration, defined as any change affecting equity distribution by more than 5% or any modification to voting rights. Trevor's restructuring eliminated my entire 47% stake. That qualified. Trevor had called it overly cautious when we signed it. His attorney had agreed, noting that such clauses were extremely rare and likely unenforceable. I'd insisted anyway. Trevor had laughed, kissed my forehead, and signed where I pointed. He'd been in a hurry that day. We had a pitch meeting with investors in 2 hours. He'd trusted me to handle the details. He'd forgotten it existed. I'd counted on that. I saved 3 copies of the document, one to my personal cloud storage, one to an encrypted USB drive, and one to an email draft I sent to myself. Then I opened my calendar and blocked out the next 2 hours. I had phone calls to make. Important ones. My attorney's name was Philippa Stokes. I'd met her 3 years ago at a Women in Tech networking event at the Denver Country Club. We'd stayed in touch, meeting quarterly for coffee, discussing everything from contract law to venture capital structures. Trevor didn't know about these meetings. He'd stopped tracking my calendar around the time he started rewriting his own. Philippa answered on the second ring. "Good morning, Sutton." "He moved unilaterally," I said. No preamble. Philippa didn't require social niceties. It was one of the things I appreciated about her. When? Yesterday. Executed a revised shareholding agreement that eliminates my equity position. Reduces me to advisory status with no voting rights and no financial participation. Did he notify the board? No. Did he obtain unanimous consent as required by your original shareholder framework? No. He bypassed every required approval process. She paused. I heard papers rustling in the background. Forward me the original Series A agreement. I need to review Section 19 again. I remember the broad strokes, but I want the exact language. Already attached to the email I'm sending you now. Another pause. Then, quietly, he has no idea what he's done, does he? No, I said. He doesn't. Good. Don't tell him. Don't confront him. Don't give him any indication that you're planning a response. Let him think you're accepting this quietly. That's the plan. I'll have my team review everything by the end of the day. We'll schedule a call for tomorrow morning. In the meantime, document everything. Every conversation. Every email. Every decision he makes is without proper authorization. Already doing that, I said. Have been for months. Philippa laughed softly. Of course you have. Trevor came home at 9:30 p.m. that night. I heard his car in the driveway, the distinctive sound of his Tesla pulling into the garage. He looked tired but satisfied, the way he always did after what he considered a productive day. He dropped his briefcase by the door, loosened his tie, and headed straight for the kitchen. Hey, he said, opening the refrigerator. Did you see the updated agreement I sent this morning? I did. He pulled out a beer and twisted off the cap. I know it seems sudden, but it makes sense from a liability standpoint. Keeps your personal assets protected if anything goes sideways with the company. Hendricks recommended it months ago. Just took a while to execute the paperwork. I was sitting at the kitchen table, my laptop open, working through quarterly projections. I didn't look up. Makes sense. He seemed relieved by my lack of reaction. Relaxed visibly. Exactly. I knew you'd understand. This keeps things clean. Professional. No emotional complications if the business hits rough patches. And let's be honest, the stress hasn't been good for you. You've been working too hard. This gives you space to step back, focus on other things. Other things, I repeated, keeping my voice neutral. Yeah. You've been talking about wanting to do more consulting. Maybe write that book you mentioned. This frees you up for that. You'll still have input on major decisions, obviously. I value your perspective. This just simplifies the ownership structure. I nodded slowly. I appreciate you thinking of my well-being. Of course. We're still partners, Sutton. This is just a legal technicality. Right. A legal technicality. He took a long drink from his beer. Anyway, I've got an early meeting tomorrow. Portfolio review with the investors. I'm heading to bed. Good night, Trevor. He kissed the top of my head on his way past. The gesture was automatic, affectionless. A habit from a marriage that had quietly ended sometime in the past 2 years, though neither of us had acknowledged it yet. I waited until I heard his footsteps on the stairs. Then I opened my email and continued documenting everything he'd just said. By Friday, Trevor's confidence had solidified into arrogance. He started talking. Not to me, to colleagues, investors, board members. People he thought were firmly in his corner. People he assumed would never question his version of events. I found out because 3 of them forwarded me screenshots. Quietly. Without comment. Just the evidence, delivered with the kind of careful neutrality that meant they were hedging their own positions. One email to our CFO, Darius Webb, restructuring complete. Sutton's is officially advisory only. Should streamline decision-making considerably. No more debates over every strategic pivot. A Slack message to our VP of Operations, Maura Kincaid, finally cut the dead weight. The company is leaner now. Should see improved velocity on product launches. A text to his brother, Quentin, she took it better than I expected. Probably relieved to be off the hook for once. She's been complaining about the workload for months. Each message was a lie. I hadn't complained about the workload. I'd complained about being excluded from decisions. About finding out about major strategic shifts through company-wide emails instead of executive discussions. About being systematically marginalized in the company I'd helped build from nothing. I saved everything. Exported conversations. Created a folder labeled Communications, Chronological. Each file was timestamped, labeled by sender, and backed up in 3 locations, my personal laptop, cloud storage, and an external drive I kept in a safety deposit box. Confidence makes people sloppy. Trevor had always been confident. Overconfident, really. It was one of the traits that had made him a good entrepreneur in the early days, the willingness to take risks, to believe in unlikely outcomes. But confidence unchecked by humility becomes arrogance. And arrogance creates blind spots. I was counting on those blind spots. Philippa scheduled a conference call for Monday morning. I dialed in from my home office, door locked, laptop secured. 2 other voices joined the line, attorneys from her firm who specialized in corporate restructuring and fiduciary duty violations. Let's establish the timeline, Philippa said. Her voice was crisp, professional. Trevor executed the revised agreement on October 17 at 4:32 p.m. without board notification or unanimous consent. This triggered Section 19, subsection D of your original shareholder agreement. The 90-day review period began automatically at the time of execution. Correct, I said. During this 90-day window, any additional unauthorized changes will convert the temporary control inversion to permanent status. The clause is very specific about this. One unauthorized change triggers the review period. A second unauthorized change during that review period makes the inversion permanent and irrevocable. Has he attempted any further modifications? One of the other attorneys asked. His name was Bernard Cross, and he had 40 years of experience in corporate law. Not yet. But he will. How do you know? Because he's planning a Series C funding round. He'll need to adjust the cap table to accommodate new investors. He can't do that without triggering the secondary clause. The math doesn't work otherwise. We need to expand authorized shares and create a new class of preferred stock. Both require board approval and amended articles of incorporation. Philippa was quiet for a moment. You've been tracking this. For 18 months. Since he started having private meetings with Malcolm Hendricks. Since he stopped including me in investor calls. I knew something was coming. I just didn't know what form it would take. Then we wait, she said. We document. And when he makes his second move, we execute. In the meantime, I want you to compile everything. Every email. Every text message. Every documented instance of him making decisions without proper authorization. Build me a timeline that shows a pattern of behavior, not just isolated incidents. Already done. I'll send you the file this afternoon. Bernard spoke up again. Ms. Ashford, I have to ask. Are you prepared for how ugly this might get? Trevor will fight back. He'll hire expensive attorneys. He'll try to paint you as vindictive, as someone trying to steal his company. It's not his company, I said quietly. It's our company. And I'm not stealing anything. I'm protecting what I built. Understood. Just making sure you know what you're walking into. I do, I said. I've known for a long time. Trevor didn't notice the changes immediately. He was too focused on his next big move, a $200 million Series C round that would triple the company's valuation and position Vanguard as a major player in the enterprise software space. He'd been courting investors for months. Venture capital firms from Silicon Valley. Private equity groups from New York. He'd even flown to Singapore twice to meet with international funds. What he didn't realize was that I'd been having my own conversations. Quiet ones. With the same investors. Not to sabotage his efforts, I still owned the company as much as he did, whether he acknowledged it or not, but to establish relationships. To ensure that when questions arose about leadership and ownership structure, I'd already built credibility. These conversations were careful. Strategic. I never contradicted Trevor's pitch. Never undermined his vision. I simply presented myself as an equal partner. Answered technical questions he couldn't. Demonstrated deep knowledge of our product architecture, customer base, and competitive positioning. The investors noticed. Several of them commented on it. It's refreshing to see a founding team where both partners bring complementary strengths, one venture partner told me after a dinner meeting in Palo Alto. Too often we see a visionary founder paired with someone who's just along for the ride. That's clearly not the case here. I'd smiled and thanked him. And documented the conversation. I'd also quietly separated our personal finances. We'd maintained joint accounts for years, a relic of earlier, happier times. But 18 months ago, I'd opened my own accounts. Redirected my consulting income from side projects. Titled investments independently. Moved my inherited funds from my grandmother into separate trusts. Nothing hidden, nothing illegal. Just prudent financial planning. The kind any financial advisor would recommend for someone with significant assets. Trevor never noticed. He'd stopped looking at household finances years ago, content to let me manage what he considered mundane details. Bills. Taxes. Investment accounts. Insurance policies. He had no idea what I owned or where I kept it. Another miscalculation on his part. The second trigger came on November 23, the day before Thanksgiving. Trevor filed amended articles of incorporation to facilitate the Series C round. The changes were technical, expanding authorized shares from 50 million to 200 million, adjusting voting structures to accommodate new investor protections, and creating a new class of Series C preferred stock with specific rights and preferences. Standard procedure for venture funding. Except he did it without board approval. Again. The filing appeared in my email at 2:17 p.m., forwarded by our corporate secretary, Lorelei Vance. Her message was brief: FYI, received this from the state filing office. Wasn't aware we'd voted on this. Should I add it to the next board meeting agenda for retroactive approval? I stared at the message for a long moment. This was it. The second unauthorized change. The one that would make the control inversion permanent. I forwarded it to Philippa with a single-line message: secondary trigger confirmed. Article amendments filed without board approval. She responded within 15 minutes, conversion clause now active. Preparing documentation. Don't respond to Lorelei yet. Let me handle communications. I closed my laptop and looked out the window. The November sky was gray, heavy with the promise of early snow. The mountains in the distance were already white at the peaks. I thought about the 12 years we'd spent building Vanguard solutions. The late nights. The product launches. The moments when everything seemed impossible, and we'd somehow made it work anyway. I thought about Trevor, who'd been my partner in all of it. Who'd held my hand when we signed our first office lease. Who'd celebrated with me when we landed our first major client. Who'd told me I was brilliant, essential, irreplaceable. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. And sad. And ready for whatever came next. The automatic notifications went out at 9 a.m. on November 27th, the Tuesday after Thanksgiving. Trevor was in New York, meeting with investors. I was home in Denver, reviewing the legal documents that Philippa's team had prepared over the past 4 days. The notifications were clinical. No accusations. No drama. Just facts, presented in neutral corporate language. They went to every board member, every major shareholder, and every C-suite executive. They explained that unauthorized modifications to the corporate structure had triggered contingency provisions in the original shareholder agreement. That control had automatically inverted per Section 19, subsection D. That all major decisions now required my explicit approval until the situation was resolved through proper board review. The notifications included attachments: the original shareholder agreement with the relevant section highlighted, documentation of Trevor's October 17 restructuring, and documentation of his November 23 filing. Everything was presented factually, with timestamps and relevant legal citations. Trevor's assistant, Whitney Carver, called me at 9:47 a.m. Her voice was carefully neutral. Ms. Ashford, I've received some unusual notifications this morning regarding corporate governance. Should I be concerned? No, Whitney. Just some administrative corrections. Nothing that affects day-to-day operations. Mr. Ashford is trying to reach you. He's called 3 times in the past 10 minutes. Should I patch him through? Tell him I'll call him when I'm available. I didn't call him. Not that day. Not the next. I let him sit with it. Let him try to piece together what had happened. Let him realize, slowly, that the foundation he'd assumed was solid had always been made of sand. My phone rang continuously for hours. Text messages piled up. Voicemails accumulated. I ignored all of them. Philippa had been clear: let the process work. Let the automatic provisions take effect. Let the board digest the information before Trevor could spin his own narrative. He came home on November 29th. I heard his car in the driveway at 11:30 p.m., much later than I'd expected. The front door opened hard enough that it hit the wall. His footsteps were heavy on the hardwood floors, lacking their usual measured confidence. Sutton. His voice carried up the stairs, sharp with anger and something else. Something that might have been fear. Where are you? I was in my office, reviewing financial projections for Q4. I saved my work, closed my laptop, and walked downstairs. Trevor was standing in the kitchen, still wearing his coat, his tie askew, his face flushed with anger and what looked unmistakably like panic. What the hell is this? He thrust his phone toward me. An email was pulled up on the screen, one of the automatic notifications. What the hell did you do? It's exactly what it says it is, I replied calmly. A contingency clause in our shareholder agreement. The one we signed 8 years ago. The one you violated when you unilaterally restructured ownership without board consent. That clause is symbolic. Hendricks said it was unenforceable. He said it would never hold up. Malcolm Hendricks was wrong. And you didn't consult him about your November 23rd filing, did you? The articles of incorporation you amended without board approval? Trevor's jaw tightened. That filing was routine. Standard procedure for Series C preparation. Every company does it. Every company does it with board approval. You bypassed that. Just like you bypassed board approval for the ownership restructuring. Which means the contingency clause is now fully active. After your first violation, I temporarily controlled decision-making authority for a 90-day review period. After your second violation, that control became permanent. He stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. You planned this. You set me up. No, Trevor. You executed this. I just read what you signed. You signed that shareholder agreement 8 years ago. You agreed to those terms. You violated them twice. The consequences are automatic. I didn't create them, you did. I'll fight this. Hendricks will tear this apart. That clause is ambiguous. It's unenforceable. No court would uphold it. The clause isn't ambiguous. It's precisely written. And Hendricks already reviewed it this afternoon, didn't he? That's why you look terrified. Trevor's silence confirmed it. He told you it's enforceable, I continued. He told you that you violated clear provisions of a legally binding agreement that you signed willingly with full legal counsel present. He told you that you have no case. You did this to destroy me. I did this to protect myself. There's a difference. The next 48 hours were chaos. Trevor hired 3 different attorneys. They reviewed the shareholder agreement. They consulted with corporate law specialists from firms in New York and San Francisco. They tried to find loopholes, procedural errors, anything that might invalidate the contingency clause. They found nothing. The agreement was ironclad. Trevor had signed it willingly, with full legal counsel present. Malcolm Hendricks himself had reviewed it back then. The contingency provisions were clearly stated, properly executed, and completely enforceable. The language was precise, the triggering events were well-defined, and the consequences were automatic. The only way out was unanimous board consent to reverse the control inversion, and I was now the deciding vote on the board. I could block any attempt to undo what Trevor had triggered. Trevor tried negotiation. He showed up at the house on December 1st with flowers and a legal proposal. He offered to restore my original equity position. I declined. He offered additional equity, 55% instead of 47%. I declined. He offered board seats, veto power over specific decisions, and operational control over specific divisions. I declined everything. What do you want, Sutton? He finally asked. We were in his office at Vanguard headquarters. It was after hours. The building was empty except for security. Name it. Whatever you want. We can work this out. What I want is what I've always wanted, I said. Partnership. Respect. Recognition for the work I've done building this company. Equal voice in decisions that affect our future. You'll have all of that. I promise. We'll restructure everything. Make it truly equal. I already have it, Trevor. The difference is that now it's legally protected. You can't take it away with a signature on a document you execute without telling me. His expression hardened. So, this is revenge. I tried to cut you out, and now you're cutting me out. I'm not cutting you out. You're still CEO. You still run day-to-day operations. You still have equity. You still have your salary and benefits. The only thing that's changed is that you can't make major decisions unilaterally anymore. You have to consult the board. You have to follow proper procedures. You have to treat me like the partner I've always been. That's not what this is about. This is about control. You want to control everything. No, Trevor. I want to stop you from controlling everything. There's a difference. The board meeting was scheduled for December 14th. All 7 board members attended, including Trevor and I, plus 5 external members who represented our major investors. The conference room was silent as Philippa walked them through the situation. She presented the original shareholder agreement, printed and bound, with relevant sections marked with colored tabs. She highlighted Section 19, subsection D, reading it aloud slowly so everyone could follow the precise language. She showed documentation of Trevor's October 17th restructuring, the email he'd sent, the executed document, and the lack of board notification. She showed documentation of his November 23rd filing, the state records, the amended articles of incorporation, and again the lack of board approval. She explained how both actions had triggered the contingency provisions. She cited relevant case law from Delaware and Colorado corporate disputes. She answered questions for 90 minutes, patiently explaining complex legal concepts in terms the non-lawyer board members could understand. When she finished, the board chair, Desmond Hollinger, turned to Trevor. Desmond was in his late 60s, a veteran investor who'd seen every variety of corporate dispute over his 40-year career. His expression was carefully neutral. Trevor, did you have legal counsel review these actions before you executed them? Malcolm Hendricks advised on the October restructuring, Trevor said. His voice was tight. Did Mr. Hendricks recommend executing the restructuring without board approval? He said it was cleaner to present it as a completed action rather than a proposal. I see. And did Mr. Hendricks advise on the November filing? No. Why not? Trevor didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter. I thought it was routine. Something the CEO could authorize independently. But you knew the original shareholder agreement required board approval for articles amendments? I didn't remember that provision. Desmond nodded slowly. He turned to me. Ms. Ashford, what are you proposing going forward? Continued operations under the current structure, I said. Trevor remains CEO. I resume my position as president and COO, the position I held before the October restructuring. All major decisions require joint approval as they did originally. The company continues as planned. No disruption to operations, employees, or customer relationships. And the Series C round? Proceeds as scheduled. With proper board oversight this time. I support the round. I think it's the right move for the company. I just want it done correctly. Desmond looked around the table. I'll need to consult with our investor groups, but I don't see any issues with this structure. It's closer to how most well-run companies operate, with checks and balances, shared authority, proper oversight. Does anyone else see problems? Silence. One by one, the board members shook their heads. One of them, Darren Northcott, who represented a major venture fund, smiled slightly. Honestly, this might be an improvement. Shared leadership reduces risk. Trevor sat frozen, his face pale. He'd walked into this meeting expecting support, expecting the board to override the contingency clause, expecting his attorneys to have found some way out. Instead, he'd found a unanimous board that had just realized he'd been operating outside proper governance for months. He'd lost, and everyone in the room knew it. The company valuation came back at $638 million. 3 independent firms had assessed our assets, intellectual property, market position, and growth trajectory. We'd hired them specifically to establish a fair market value for the Series C round negotiations. The average of their 3 estimates was $638.4 million, to be precise. Under the original shareholder agreement, my 47% stake was worth just over $300 million. Under Trevor's revised agreement, the one he'd executed without authorization, my stake had been worth nothing. Now, with control restored and formalized, my position was not only secured but strengthened. Trevor's stake had shrunk proportionally. The unauthorized restructuring had created legal liabilities that affected his equity position. His attorneys had advised that maintaining his previous 53% stake could create an appearance of impropriety, that he'd personally benefited from unauthorized actions. To avoid potential shareholder lawsuits, he'd had to accept dilution. His 53% had dropped to 41%. The remaining shares were held by early employees, advisors, and previous investors. Malcolm Hendricks tried to contest the valuation. Called it artificially low. Demanded reevaluation. Philippa buried him in documentation, comparable company valuations, revenue multiples, market analysis. Within 3 weeks, he stopped responding to Trevor's calls. Apparently, even Malcolm had limits to how far he'd pursue a losing case. Trevor's reputation cracked slowly, then all at once. Board members started scheduling meetings without including him. Investor calls were routed to me instead. Strategic decisions that used to go through his office came to mind first. He tried to push back. Sent aggressive emails asserting his authority as CEO. Demanded explanations for why he wasn't included in specific discussions. Questioned my decisions in public forums, company all-hands meetings, investor updates, even on Slack channels where the entire company could see. Each time, I responded with documentation. With data. With the calm, measured professionalism that had always been my strength. I never got defensive. Never matched his aggression. Just presented facts and moved forward. By January, even his closest allies had stopped defending him. Not openly, that would have been too obvious. But in subtle ways. Forgotten invitations to lunches. Delayed responses to his emails. The quiet adjustment of loyalty that happens when everyone realizes the foundation has shifted. Darius, our CFO, started copying me on financial reports he used to send to Trevor alone. Maura began running operational decisions by me before implementing them. Even Whitney, Trevor's assistant, started checking with me before adding items to his calendar. The company had recognized where real authority resided. And it wasn't with the CEO who'd tried to restructure ownership without permission. In February, Trevor violated internal policy by trying to override a product decision I'd made. It was a small thing, a feature prioritization that affected our Q2 roadmap. I'd decided to delay a particular customer-requested feature in favor of infrastructure improvements. Trevor disagreed. Instead of discussing it with me, he'd gone directly to the engineering team, bypassing the established approval process. The engineering lead, Foster Whitmore, forwarded me the request within an hour. Just wanted to confirm the chain of command here. I've got conflicting directives from you and Trevor. Which one takes precedence? I thanked him and documented the violation. Added it to the growing file that Philippa maintained. We weren't building a case, we were simply recording facts. But the pattern was clear and troubling. Trevor was unraveling. Making increasingly erratic decisions. Undermining processes he'd previously supported. Testing boundaries to see what he could still control. I scheduled a private meeting with him. Just the two of us, in a conference room, away from other employees. Trevor, this needs to stop. You're undermining your own authority. Every time you bypass proper procedures, you weaken your position further. People are losing confidence in your leadership. My leadership? You've stolen my company. You've turned everyone against me. And now you're lecturing me about leadership? I haven't stolen anything. You still have your equity. You're still CEO. But you need to work within the structure that exists, not keep fighting battles you've already lost. I haven't lost. This isn't over. Yes, Trevor. It is. He left the meeting without another word. I sat alone in the conference room for a long time afterwards, feeling a sadness I hadn't expected. This man had been my partner. My husband. Someone I'd once loved deeply. Watching him self-destruct was harder than I'd anticipated. But I couldn't save him. Especially not from himself. The Series C round closed in March. $200 million at a $640 million valuation. The investors were satisfied with the governance structure. The board was satisfied with the strategic direction. The press coverage was positive articles in TechCrunch, Business Insider, The Wall Street Journal. Vanguard Solutions was positioned for aggressive growth. Trevor attended the closing meeting remotely. He was in Los Angeles, supposedly meeting with potential acquisition targets. Really, he was avoiding the office. Avoiding me. Avoiding the reality of what he'd lost. The investor presentations had been split between us. I handled technical architecture and product roadmap. He handled market positioning and competitive strategy. It should have felt like old times, like the partnership we used to have. Instead, it felt like a performance. Two people playing roles they no longer believed in. After the meeting, Desmond pulled me aside. Sutton, I need to ask you something confidential. Of course. Have you considered a leadership transition? You mean removing Trevor as CEO? I mean, providing him an exit that preserves his dignity while acknowledging the current reality. He's not functioning effectively in his role. Everyone can see it. He's becoming a liability. I thought about it carefully. Let him decide. If he wants to step down, I won't oppose it. I'll even help structure a transition that protects his reputation. But if he wants to stay, we'll work within the current structure. Desmond nodded slowly. That's generous of you. It wasn't generosity. It was a strategy. The moment I pushed Trevor out would be the moment the narrative shifted. I'd become the villain, the wife who stole her husband's company. If he chose to leave on his own terms, the story would be different. He'd be the founder moving on to new challenges, and I'd be the steady leader maintaining continuity. I could wait. I'd been waiting for years. I could wait a little longer. Trevor announced his resignation on April 3rd. The press release was carefully worded, drafted by our communications team with input from his attorneys. After 12 transformative years building Vanguard Solutions from concept to industry leader, Trevor Ashford is stepping down as CEO to pursue new ventures and opportunities. He will remain on the board of directors and continue as a strategic advisor to the company. Trevor's vision and entrepreneurial drive have been instrumental in Vanguard's success, and his contributions will continue to shape our future. The statement made no mention of the shareholder dispute. No mention of unauthorized restructuring, contingency clauses or governance failures. It was clean, professional, and completely dishonest. But that was the agreement. He got a dignified exit, and I got unchallenged authority. I was named CEO effective immediately. The board vote was unanimous. The press release announcing my appointment was equally gracious. Sutton Ashford, co-founder and president, brings deep technical expertise and proven leadership to the CEO role. Under her guidance, Vanguard will continue its trajectory of innovation and growth. Trevor called me that evening. I was in my office, reviewing transition plans with our executive team. I stepped out to take the call. "You got what you wanted," he said. His voice was flat, emotionless. "This isn't what I wanted, Trevor. What I wanted was a partnership. What I got was a fight I didn't start but had to finish. You destroyed me." "No. You destroyed yourself. I just documented it. Every decision you made freely. Every violation you committed knowingly. I simply responded to actions you took. People will know the truth. I'll tell them what you did. Tell them whatever you want. The documents speak for themselves. You signed an agreement. You violated it twice. Automatic consequences were triggered. That's the whole story. You're cold, Sutton. I never realized how cold you were. I'm not cold. I'm just done pretending that emotional appeals override legal agreements." He hung up. We didn't speak again for 6 months. The social consequences were quieter than I'd expected. Trevor and I had never been social climbers. Our friend group was small, mostly professional contacts and college acquaintances we'd stayed in touch with. Most of them adjusted to the new reality without drama. A few sided with Trevor. Sent me pointed messages about loyalty and marriage vows and how I'd betrayed someone who trusted me. I didn't respond. You can't argue with people who've already decided you're wrong. They'd made their choice, and I respected it even if I disagreed. The rest either supported me openly or maintained careful neutrality. The neutrality bothered me more than the opposition. The silence that meant people were waiting to see who came out on top before committing their allegiance. But I understood it. In business, survival requires flexibility. People align with power, and power had shifted. They were simply being practical. My family was solidly in my corner. My mother had never particularly liked Trevor. She thought he was charming but fundamentally self-centered. My brother, a corporate attorney in Chicago, reviewed all the documents and declared the contingency clause brilliant legal planning. My college roommate, who'd been maid of honor at my wedding, told me she'd been waiting for me to wake up for years. "He never deserved you," she said over dinner one night. "You built that company as much as he did. More, probably. You did the actual work while he took the credit." "It wasn't always like that," I said. "In the early days, we were genuine partners." "Maybe. But people change. Or maybe they just reveal who they always were." By summer, Vanguard's trajectory had stabilized. Revenue was up 34% year-over-year. We'd launched 2 major products that were being adopted by enterprise customers faster than projected. Employee retention was at an all-time high. People appreciated the clearer leadership structure and the more transparent decision-making. The board was satisfied. Quarterly reviews were positive. Investor confidence was strong. I was exhausted but functional, working 12-hour days to prove that the leadership transition had been the right decision. Trevor had moved to Austin. He was consulting for early-stage startups, offering strategic advice to founders who didn't know his history. According to mutual contacts, he was positioning himself as a successful tech entrepreneur who'd exited his company to pursue new challenges. The narrative was close enough to the truth that most people didn't question it. I heard updates occasionally, through industry news, through mutual contacts, through the inevitable gossip network. He seemed fine. Diminished, but fine. Smaller in scope, narrower in influence, but functional. I didn't wish him harm. I didn't wish him anything, really. He'd become irrelevant to my life in a way that surprised me. 12 years of marriage, And all that remained was a legal settlement and a shared corporate history. I didn't hate him. Hate requires energy, requires emotional investment. I'd spent all my energy building something that lasted. I had nothing left over for hatred. The divorce was finalized in September, exactly 11 months after the email that started everything. Our settlement was straightforward. Trevor kept his reduced stake in Vanguard, his personal assets, and his retirement accounts. I kept everything else. The house in Denver. The cabin in Aspen. The investment portfolio I'd built over the past 18 months. He didn't contest any of it. His attorney had advised him that fighting would only expose the shareholder dispute to public scrutiny and would only create more documentation of his governance failures. Trevor chose reputation preservation over financial recovery. It was the first smart decision he'd made in 2 years. Our divorce was uncontested, processed through mediation rather than litigation. We met twice with a mediator, divided assets according to Colorado's equitable distribution laws, and signed the final papers without drama. Trevor was polite but distant. I was professional but detached. "Do you think we could have fixed this?" he asked during our final mediation session. "If we'd handled things differently?" I thought about it honestly. I don't know. Maybe if you'd talked to me instead of trying to eliminate me. Maybe if you'd valued partnership over control. But we'll never know. I'm sorry. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I know you are. But sorry doesn't undo what happened. No. It doesn't. We signed the papers. Shook hands formally. And walked out of the mediation office in opposite directions. 1 year after the email, after the morning I'd stood in my kitchen reading the document that was supposed to erase me, I was sitting in my office at Vanguard headquarters. The corner office that used to be Trevor's. The view looked west toward the mountains, toward snow-capped peaks that caught the afternoon light and turned gold. My executive assistant, Kieran Moss, buzzed me. "Sutton, you have a call from Forbes. They're doing a feature on women in tech leadership. Are you available? Tell them I'll call back tomorrow." "Will do." Also, the Q3 board meeting is confirmed for next Wednesday at 2 p.m. Desmond wants to discuss the acquisition opportunity in Seattle. Thank you, Kieran. I turned back to my laptop. Quarterly projections needed review. The product roadmap needed approval. The acquisition opportunity required analysis. Normal work. Executive work. The work I'd always done, now with the recognition I'd always deserved. My phone buzzed. A text from Philippa, saw the Q3 numbers. Impressive. You built something remarkable. I smiled and typed back, we built something remarkable. Couldn't have done it without you. You could have. You just would have taken longer. Dinner next week to celebrate? Absolutely. I set down my phone and looked around my office. The framed shareholder agreement is on the wall. The photos of product launches. The awards from industry organizations. The evidence of everything I'd built, protected, and preserved. I ran into Trevor at a tech conference in November. He was networking in the lobby of a San Francisco hotel, surrounded by a small group of startup founders who were clearly impressed by whatever story he was telling. I was meeting with potential acquisition targets, dressed in the professional armor of a CEO, tailored suit, confident posture, the demeanor of someone who belonged in positions of power. We both stopped when we saw each other. The group around him fell silent, sensing tension they didn't understand. Sutton. Trevor. Silence. Then he excused himself from the group and walked over. I heard about the Q3 numbers. Impressive. 41% growth year over year. Thank you. You're doing well. The company's doing well. We have a good team. He nodded. Looked like he wanted to say something else. Changed his mind. Take care of yourself, Sutton. You too, Trevor. We walked in opposite directions. I felt a dozen pairs of eyes following me, people wondering about the story they'd just witnessed. Let them wonder. Some stories don't need to be told publicly. That was the last time I saw him. By year 2, Vanguard had grown to 847 employees across 4 offices. We'd expanded into 3 new markets: healthcare, financial services, and manufacturing. Our valuation had increased to $1.2 billion. The Series C had funded aggressive expansion that was paying off ahead of projections. I'd been named to several top 40 under 40 lists, had spoken at 2 major industry conferences, TechCrunch, Disrupt, and Web Summit, and had been interviewed for 3 business publications. Forbes had profiled me as part of their Self-Made Women series. Business Insider had written about our corporate governance structure as a model for avoiding founder conflicts. The narrative had shifted completely. I was no longer Trevor Ashford's wife or co-founder. I was Sutton Ashford, CEO of Vanguard Solutions. A leader in my own right. A success story built on competence, preparation, and patience. Trevor's name rarely came up anymore. When it did, it was usually in relation to his early contributions to Vanguard, the founding story, the early days, the initial vision. Historical context. Past tense. He'd become a footnote in a story that had always been as much mine as his. I hired a new president and COO, a woman named Brenna Lockhart who'd previously run operations at a larger enterprise software company. Together, we were building something sustainable, not just a successful business, but a healthy organizational culture, proper governance structures, and leadership development programs. I was also teaching. Adjunct faculty at the University of Colorado's Business School, teaching a seminar on corporate governance and founder dynamics. My students were fascinated by the real-world case studies I brought to class, though I never mentioned my own story directly. Some things were better learned through implication. I framed the original shareholder agreement. Had it professionally mounted, the pages would have been preserved behind museum-grade glass. Section 19, subsection D was highlighted in subtle gold leaf, barely noticeable unless you knew to look for it. It hangs in my office now. Not prominently, I'm not petty. It's positioned on a side wall, between my Stanford diploma and a photo of our Series C closing. Most visitors don't notice it. Those who do usually assume it's just another corporate document, no more significant than the others. But I know what it represents. Not revenge, I was never interested in revenge. Protection. Preparation. The quiet strength of someone who read the fine print, remembered what mattered, and acted decisively when necessary. Visitors sometimes ask about it. What's that document? I give them the short version, a contingency clause that proved important. I don't tell them about the email. About the morning, I stood in my kitchen and realized my husband had tried to erase me from the company we'd built together. About the months of careful documentation. About the waiting and the watching and the strategic patience it required. I don't need to tell them. The results speak clearly enough. Trevor tried to rewrite our agreement without my knowledge or consent. He thought he could eliminate my ownership with a signature and a notary stamp. He forgot about the clause I'd insisted on 8 years earlier. And in doing so, he didn't just lose control, he revealed that he'd never truly understood what partnership meant. I triggered the clause he'd ignored. Protected what I'd built. Secured what I'd earned. And in doing so, I didn't just save myself, I built something lasting. Something that couldn't be taken away by a signature on a document or a moment of arrogance, or a marriage that had quietly ended. I never raised my voice. I never broke the law. I simply read what he'd signed and remembered what he'd forgotten. The quietest person in the room is often the one who understands power best. Not power as dominance, but power as competence. As preparation. As the patient accumulates knowledge, documentation, and strategic relationships. Trevor taught me that lesson, though not in the way he intended. And I've never forgotten it.